Good morning, it's Rod Fleming here, still in the Philippines. Big changes are happening, we'll keep you informed as they happen. So, today I want to talk about a video that I actually put up, I think just before Christmas, in which I said Alexander, as in Alexander the Great, Alexander of Macedon, was not gay, which he certainly was not. And a lot of people are like, oh, usually get this from the modern gays. Oh my God, we can't have people saying things like that. Oh my God, they might find out what we're really like. Alexander was not gay. Alexander would not have understood the concept of modern gayness. And the reason for that is actually quite interesting. So I think I will go into it. Just hang on a minute and I'll put the light on because it's a bit dim in here at the moment. Well, maybe it helps. Anyway. Why is it interesting? And the real difference, you know, because it's quite marked that you have this real difference in understanding between what seems to be commonly accepted in the West now, and the historical case, you know, really going back up to really only a matter of 50 or 60 years ago, and the global case, which is the same as that was. And I've always called that the Roman model. Now, it wasn't invented by the Romans. It was invented by some other people. Hi, here's my girlfriend. This is also Sam. Sam, just put it down there for me just now, darling. She's bringing coffee. She's lovely. She's so sweet. She's embarrassed now. Anywho, let's leave that to one side. Sam's lovely. Sam isn't. Nobody can replace my Sam, you know, but Sam is absolutely adorable. She's lovely, and I do love her. Anyway, let's get back to Alexander and why he wasn't gay, which he certainly wasn't. Now, the real difference. Now, we said, you know, if you go back a little bit, not really that far. I mean, only 60 or 70 years, or you excuse the dog, or you go, you know, wider than the West, then you find this completely different model, which is not the same as the Western model. So people are coming onto my site and saying, oh, but well, I'm a gay, and so he must have been a gay. Oh, that's fucking shite, isn't it? I'm afraid, I'll move this to get better light. I'm afraid it's just, you know, absolutely redolent of modern gays. You know, they can't possibly be left out, for God's sake. Why is Alexander not like modern gays? And the answer is egalitarianism. Okay? Now, just get that into your head. Egalitarianism. What? What is the old fool saying now? Egalitarianism? See, in all forms of sexuality that involve a male, otherwise, the male member, the priapic apparatus, a power hierarchy is created when two people have sex, right? So that the dominant person penetrates the submissive person. Sorry, girls, that's the way it is. You have to submit, you have to open your legs, you have to be, you know, accept. And the same is true if it's two men, or two males rather, having sex. A power hierarchy is automatically created. There's no way around that. There's all, even they talk about it, doms, tops, that sort of thing, and on the other side, subs and bottoms, you know, they recognise it themselves, but they won't just admit it. It's very, very strange. Anyhow, in the ancient world, yeah, men had sex with other men all the time. It was absolutely normal. I mean, if you were away from where you had access to women, maybe you were a soldier on campaign, maybe you were just away hunting, you know, maybe you had a boy whom you were training to be a man, who lived in your house. Well, what do you think he was doing at night? I get real here. What do you think he was doing at night? None of this is gay in the modern sense, because the modern sense of gay requires the egalitarianism. I remember seeing a quote which I thought was very apposite, and it said that the ideal of modern gayness, and this was written in the 70s, would be a 35-year-old dentist with a 35-year-old lawyer, both male obviously, because they're equal. It's egalitarian. And although it was unsaid, the assumption is made that they do for each other. You know, they swap sexual roles. Now this never ever happened before. There's no case in the world that I can find where masculine presenting men, remember that, masculine presenting men, acted in this way. I mean, you come here, there's plenty of boys who are in relationship with other boys and, you know, they swap over and they do for each other. But they're feminine. They're extremely feminine. And one of them plays the role of a man so that they can have sex together. Now, if you haven't read Don Kulik, Travesti, and you're interested in this subject, then you need to read him now. You know, you need to go and buy this man's book, because even though he seems a little bit shy about it now, it's absolutely so on point, it's incredible. And he talks about the transformative nature of sex, such that he could take a travesti. A travesti is basically a ladyboy, right? It's a homosexual male, or at least a feminized male, who presents as a woman and who has sex with men. And he did a nice little study on this while he was living in Brazil. And he found that although the encounters with men in which the travesti topped, if you like, penetrated the man, were the ones they tended to remember, it was actually only about 40% of the encounters. And he did a statistical study on this, which is one of the very few. There's really not much material, and we're indebted to Professor Kulik for this. But he tried to figure out what was going on. And what he said was that it was very, very interesting, because what was happening was that the travesti saw herself as a girl, right? She was still feminine. But she turned into a man in order to penetrate a client who was, you know, who wanted to be penetrated. So she was male, had transformed into a woman, or, you know, into something like a woman, you know, into a feminine representation, but then turned back into a man in order to penetrate men. And that this was a really powerful hit for them. There's a power hierarchy. The travestis are used to being submissive, with men penetrating them. And most of the time they just love it. It's just like, yeah, that's what they like. But occasionally it's like, yeah, some of you guys have been really unpleasant. So this is payback time, and I'm going to make it hurt. Are you following me? Right? So the power hierarchy is still there, but this time it's the travesti in the position of power. And if you go to places where trans prostitution is common, where you get a lot of trans femmes in prostitution, places like, for example, Pattaya or here, you'll find that there are girls who are very much the same. You know, they're seeking men who want to be penetrated. So this idea of power hierarchy is essential to traditional understandings of homosexuality, of sex between two men. The whole point of the West is that it's supposed to be egalitarian. There is not supposed to be this power hierarchy, which actually, you know, that's one of these things, it's like an unsquareable circle. It's not possible. You cannot have the relationship which is ideal in, you know, in so-called queer theory. Crazy people. Anytime, you know, that goes in there, that's a power hierarchy. One person has power over the other. So the point is that in ancient Greece and in ancient Mesopotamia and in Rome and all the other places, this power hierarchy was absolutely clear and defined. Wait a minute. You are a fucking nuisance, cat. The point is that in all these ancient cultures, you know, Greece, Rome, Egypt, Mesopotamia, doesn't matter where you go, same in China, same in India, the power structure was there. The power hierarchy was there. Right? It was essential to it. So what sex was about in these cultures was not so much about men with women, right? It was about power. It was dominant over submissive. Are you with me? This was actually what was going on. When men had sex with their wives, if they had wives, it was the same thing. It was dominant, submissive. And that's why you get all these cultural things that people hate these days, where women really, in Athens, women had absolutely no power at all. They were in an equally awful situation as that to which Muslim women find themselves today. And they find themselves in that position for the same reason. That in the power hierarchy, they are subjugate to the men. Right? Modern Western gayness, so-called, doesn't accept that. It wants everybody to be egalitarian. You know, a Greek would have gone, you what? They was just going, what are you talking about? That's impossible. They wouldn't have understood it. Alexander wouldn't understand it. Yeah, I am entirely sure that he banged his share of males, but they were all inferior to him. I mean, he was the king. You know what I mean? Hard to get somebody, you know, superior to the king in a feudal society. It's really not easy. So he could basically pick any guy and say, okay, I'm going to have you now. And the guy had to go, yeah, okay. Drops his, well, he didn't wear pants, lifted his kilt, and off you go. That's what happened. There was no egalitarian nonsense about it at all. They didn't think in those terms. I mean, the Greeks and all the cultures before them and subsequent, they had homosexuals. But they were a specific class of people who were called, one of the translations of catamite, usually, excuse the neighbour. In Greek, that's kinados. In Latin, that's kinidos. They're very similar words, they're just spelled slightly differently. And it means the same thing, a catamite. And you can translate catamite as bottom, if you want a modern English word. A bottom homosexual, catamite. So those were in the culture. People knew about them. They also had trans femmes. They had eunuchs. And if you read Philo of Alexandria, he talks about how the level to which these people feminized themselves. You know, they spared no effort in their attempts to completely destroy all remnant of their masculinity. That's a trans femme. That's exactly the same as a travesti. That's the same as a ladyboy. And excuse my bloody cat. So, the reason that Alexander could not possibly have been gay is that he would not have understood a model of sex that was egalitarian. He would have just gone, no, that doesn't work. I mean, go forward a few centuries, a couple of centuries, and think about the Emperor Hadrian. I think it would be about 4 centuries actually. Hadrian had famously had a juvenile lover who was called Antoninus. And he was young and beautiful, and eventually somebody drowned him in the river because they didn't like what he and the emperor were up to. But there was no suggestion that these were equals. I mean, please, one was the bloody emperor, and the other was a guy, a young male that he was banging. I mean, come on, people, get real. Your model of modern gayness is it's an invention. It's an invention of the 1960s. It didn't exist. The very term egalitarian homosexuality, which is wasn't invented until the 1960s. And it certainly had no power until the 1970s, and people started saying, well, we're all going to have to be masculine, and, you know, we're going to have to act like we are, you know, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know what they do in bed together. I don't fucking care, you know. All I'm saying is, you cannot take this egalitarian model and try and paste it, copy paste it on top of the past, of figures in the past, like Alexander or Hadrian. Loads of people, men did it all the time. Roman soldiers took boys on campaign with them because they weren't allowed to take women. Women could get pregnant, have babies, something. You've got an army full of babies. I don't think so. So they took boys. Banged them instead. And nobody thought this was gay. Don't be so stupid, because they had catamites. It's like, no, yeah, you mean like a catamite? You think Roman soldiers are catamites? I don't think so. You know, maybe you'd like to discuss that with one of them sometime, you know? Don't think so. The point being that the power hierarchy was always observed, and it is only in contemporary Western culture that has been subverted. When people talk about Islam and its injunctions against, well, it's gayness, really, because the Muslims have always been very good at, you know, that male and male sex. I mean, they do it to goats, why wouldn't they do it to boys? What they are against is the egalitarian element. It's two men with beards. two men who are able to grow beards. That's not allowed. You cannot do that. That's illegal, and you will get thrown off a building. I mean, we have a situation now where, Islam has basically gone insane. I think it was only loosely tethered to sanity in the first place. It has gone insane, and it's bringing up all this bullshit now, and people who, certainly a couple of 100 years ago, they would have just carry on. Even, in the 1960s, people travelling in the Arab world, Syria, Iraq, were commenting on the fact that, there were these guys, grown men, and they all seemed to have a boy by their side constantly. What do you think that boy was doing? I mean, grow up and use your bloody imaginations. But there's no egalitarian. It's not egalitarian at all. The boy is the bottom. The guy is the top. You've just re-established the conventional power hierarchy. And of course, this is what Americans hate. They detest, UScans rather, they detest that power hierarchy because they think they're actually an egalitarian culture, which they're not. But they like to do lip service to it. They like to pretend that they're egalitarian. You cannot have sex with two males without establishing a power hierarchy. So of course what they do is they have to be switchers. Like, oh yeah, I'm doing you tonight and you do me tomorrow, okay. Is that alright then? I mean, here they're just called bisexuals. The difference being that bisexuals in this culture don't pretend to be masculine. No, they're feminine. They're feminine gays. It's just that we can't get a real man to bang us, so I'll do you if you'll do me, That way we both get to have some fun. Is that alright with you? Yeah, why not? That's what they do. That is what they do. So anyway, that is why Alexander not only wasn't gay, it's simply impossible for him to be gay. Not only would he not have understood the concept, the egalitarian basis, which is the foundation of this modern confection of the new gay man, the modern LGB, well, actually just GB, had no meaning for him. He wouldn't have got it. I mean, there's good evidence that Alexander had a relationship with what we would call a ladyboy, a transvestite, a transsexual, whatever you want to call her, a trans femme, called Bagoas. And there's good evidence for that. It's not, we don't know for certain, but there's good evidence. And why wouldn't he? If she was beautiful and she was submissive, then as far as he was concerned, that was quite legitimate. He's a guy banging a catamite. No, there's absolutely no question of that impugning his masculinity. Because men are these ones, and they're doing that. That's what defines a man in every culture except the insane modern West. And you ask yourself, how does the West actually survive? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's not going to survive much longer. And maybe this is part of the reason that, the whole model of egalitarian culture that they pretend to have is so stupid that the culture can't survive it. It just will fold. But I'm sure it will fold. Anyway, that's enough for that. Alexander was not gay, and that's why.